This is Deb Evans. I have the honor and the pleasure of speaking with the author of Predictable Success today, Les McKeown. Les has very generously agreed to spend a few minutes with me and allow me to record this call for my franchisees, and we talk a little bit about his book and his blog post. And Les, I have to tell you that when I told my husband that we were going to do this call today, he wanted me to ask you if you knew that I was a groupie. Because apparently I walk around with your book and I get really excited, and like I said, I'm very honored to be talking to you. And he said, does he know that you're a groupie? Does he know that you follow him? And it's like, yeah. And now this is my husband, who really doesn't have quite a handle on social media as I do. So he thinks everybody that I follow, I'm literally following. So thank you very, very much for joining us. And as I had said earlier in my blog post this week, I think it is you are somebody that not only my franchisees, but anybody in business that owns a business as an entrepreneur or a franchisee should be subscribing to your blog, and we'll give everybody that URL here in a minute, and they should certainly have your book in hand and be ready to read it. One of the things that caught my attention when I picked up your book, and I'm the type of reader that likes to look at the contents page and then pick and choose the chapters that I want to read and, skip around a little bit. But right away, in the very beginning of your book, you discouraged that, and you said that it should be read from the beginning to the end. After reading it, I agree with you, but what is your reasoning for that, and when you wrote the book, Predictable Success?
Well, the main reason, Deb, is that the book presents a pretty holistic business growth model, and it describes the 7 stages that any organization goes through, as you're aware. And you'll also recall that I show the stages. I use a particular graphic that's repeated throughout the book, and the graphic and the words that I use to describe the 7 stages are pretty intuitive, and I found out over the years that most people, when they see it, if they've been in business for any length of time, it only takes them a couple of minutes to really begin to grasp exactly what's going on. And it's natural for folks to want to make an immediate sort of self-diagnosis of what stage they think they're at, and then grab the chapter that's appropriate to that and start reading, which is fine, no problem with that, except for the fact that, as I hope you discovered in reading the book, you can't really get a full sense of why you're at the stage you're at unless you've taken the time to track the growth of the business from its inception at the stage I call early struggle. Now, it's not that if you were to grab a chapter and read it out of context, you'd get nothing out of it, but you would get maybe about 2/3 of what you might get if you were to read it in context. So that was my main point, and also just to be, a little bit weird. It doesn't hinder the book sales to say something just that knocks people back. And it's funny that you should mention it, because more people have picked up on that and repeated it back to me. And it was a bit of a, it wasn't quite a toss-off, but it was not something I put a huge amount of thought into. I just thought it would be a piece of advice to give folks. But it's an amazing number of people who have said it. I've even had people email me and said, I bought your book. I had intended to glance through it, but having read what you've said, I just want to give you some notice that I'm not going to get to it for another week or so, because I'm going to have to set 2 or 3 days aside now to read the whole darn thing.
Well, it validates that, okay, a lot of people are like me then, and they read the way that I do. And I do. I look at the chapter content and I say, okay, let me do this. And then unfortunately, I think what I do is then I miss the whole message of the book. So your message was well taken, but I will tell you I still cheated a little bit. I went to your very good summaries after the chapters and read the summaries and thought, okay, forget this. I have got to start from the beginning and then go to the end and read through it. So it is very good advice, and I would suggest that to anybody that normally reads the way I do and skips around, this would be one to start from the very beginning and go through it, because there are stages in there that and some characteristics that I didn't recognize, as a former business owner, that I was part of those stages.
Right.
In the beginning. Go ahead.
I was just going to say a good example is where I talk about big dogs. To jump into the section of the book that I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment or two, where I talk about whitewater. One of the big things that happens in there is that veteran employees find that stage in the organization's development really tough, and I talk about them, refer to them as big dogs. But I've really set the scene for why they're going to find it difficult in the earlier chapters, so that's one of the examples. But we're about to go into a second printing, so I think, Deb, based on what you just told me, that what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little neon sign at the back of every chapter where those summaries are, and I'm going to say, you shouldn't be looking here.
And I think that would be great. It's just like when I scheduled this call with you, and you sent me to the online scheduler, and I know I told you later that it took me by surprise that, after I clicked submit or whatever it was I did, your voice popped up and said, "Thank you very much." Like, oh my God, he's watching me. So
it's not quite like that, but
it was a little fun like it. Well, in the stages, at the beginning is the fun phase, is I think what you called it, and I know many franchise owners as ours, that is the fun phase to be in. You're excited, you've got passion, there's so much to do and excitement about growing your business, and it's easy. And you're a young company and you're in that launch mode, but things start to get a little hectic and it's not as simple anymore, and the decision making really shouldn't be centralized on yourself. And I think from what I read, that's when you're really moving into that whitewater, that third stage of growth, and it's a little bit of a struggle, and it's less fun. So if I were to characterize my franchise system, that I think a great deal of people are in the whitewater stage, and they're really struggling right now. How do I get out of that? They're spending more time on those 911s every day, those everyday fires that are really getting them into that day-to-day business tactics. And what's your advice to help them get out of those growing pains, and how do they move out of whitewater into that next level?
Well, it's interesting, Deb, that folks who are in a franchise environment experience a particular version of what you just described. And I was a franchisee for many, many years. I had the Pizza Hut franchise in Ireland, which I've got to tell you was a very fun experience, trying to sell flat Italian bread to Irish people. All we wanted was what we call chips, fries with everything, and we ended up having to sell fries in order to get people in the stores. But I also advised many, many, many franchise organizations, both the franchisors and the franchisees. And here's what I noticed happens a lot. The core model that I describe in the book, In Predictable Success, as you say, takes a business through early struggle. That's the early years, whenever the founder owners are trying to find a market, gain traction with their market, and get to the point where they're profitable more often than not. Now, in the non-franchise world, that's by far the most dangerous stage for anybody, because it's a race against time, and it's also a race against the unknown. You don't know whether or not your product or service is going to gain acceptance with the wider market in most cases. And one of the attractions of the franchise model is that if it's done well, as I know yours is, it minimizes the risks in early struggle, because you've gone there beforehand, you've got a system, you've established that there is a market, and may not have established it in the precise geographical region that the franchisees are in, but at least the concept is proven, and so on and so forth. So early struggle tends to be shortened to some extent, and the business therefore gets to the second stage, that stage that I call fun, with more certainty and quicker in the franchise world. And what that means is that as a franchise owner, franchisee, and owning and operating my own business, I get to the fun bit quicker, and therefore there's the part of my brain that tells me this is the way it's meant to be is larger than it is for non-franchise business owners. And that's an important distinction, because what happens to every business owner is that they think the second stage, the stage I call fun, is really the be-all and end-all stage, that's what business is supposed to be like. I mean, who wouldn't want a business that's fun? During fun, there's this very fast early early growth. Often it can be, double-digit growth because you're starting from a low base. It's a small, tight team. Everybody's very enthusiastic, very passionate. We really enjoy it. As I said, it's what I call fun. And the natural instinct is to think, well, this is the way it's meant to be. And as I say, for a franchisee, you get there quicker, so you think that even more. You just think, well, this is how it's meant to be. So when you hit this whitewater stage, whenever essentially we're talking about growth pains, whenever they kick in and you start to drop the ball a little bit, or you're not quite as slick as you were, you're not as flexible, there are problems associated with success, you've got clients who are looking for you to service stuff that you want to move on to the next new client, and so on and so forth. Whenever that stage that I call whitewater hits and stuff starts to rock backwards and forwards, what's the natural reaction of the business owner? The natural reaction is, although they wouldn't think about it this way, is to say, hey, I got to fix this to get back to what I had before, because what I had before was fun. I mean, you can see that's logical and natural, right? But what that does, that mindset, is it makes the business owners take steps that instead of growing the business, subconsciously what they're doing is actually taking the business back to a previous smaller version of itself that they can control. Now, for non-franchise owners, they see the reasoning and the point and the need and the impetus to push through whitewater, not to go back to what was there before, but rather to push through to the next stage, which is the apex of any organization's growth. It's when it's at its prime. It's what I call the stage that I call predictable success, naturally enough, which is like fun, except that we control it now rather than it's success controlling us. We control it, and we get there by putting some growth-oriented systems and processes in place. Now, as I say, for the non-franchisee owner, there's really almost no option. They're in this Darwinian struggle, and there's something in their neocortex says, okay, I'm going to have to do this. And certainly when people like me come along and show the importance of systems and processes, they go do that. But to end this very long introduction to the main point that I want to say is, what I've seen with franchisees over and over and over again is because they already have a system that's been given to them that's proven, and because they've spent longer in that fun period and have come more closely to associate it with how it, quotes, is meant to be, I see franchisees all the time, instead of spurring themselves on to the next stage of greater growth and more success, subconsciously hobbling themselves in order to go back down to the fun stage and stay there. And so regularly franchise owners, franchisees who own their own businesses, they come to a point of growth and sort of stall out, go back a little bit, come back up to there again, stall out a little bit, come back, and never really push through. So that would be the main distinction that I would make, if that makes sense.
Well, and it does, and I think you've described us and even myself very well. We were hit as many businesses and franchises were hit with the economy. There's a lot of things that we've had to do without, or we can't budget for anymore because our revenue's down, and it makes it harder to push forward. It's going to come back, but what do I have to do to work a little bit harder, to be accountable, to as an owner, to push to the next level, whether it's delegation or setting up that organizational chart, making some changes to it. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work to be fiscally responsible for our own business in order to get it to that next level. And fun is fun. I mean, we all want to have a great time and not work as hard, but we've left that stage, and we can still have some of that fun in the business as long as we structure it the right way. And again, I think that's why it's important to go back to your book and make sure that you read all of the stages and clearly understand them to move forward. I
think that's
success.
A fair point, and I think you're right in pointing out the delegation issue, Deb. Again, and I say this with no judgment involved whatsoever, I'm a huge admirer of people who move into the franchise model, and I've operated, as I said, in there many, many times and would do so again in a heartbeat. However, one of the things that attracts people to a franchise model is because there's a known system there. It's usually because they have a more heightened need to control things or to feel that they're in control, if I can put it that way. And therefore, one of the things that often a franchisee will find tough to do is to give away some of that control, which is a fundamental change that a business going through Whitewater has to come through to get to predictable success, which is that at that point, Whitewater is the stage whenever the business becomes more than the person. Mm-hmm. The business becomes an entity in its own right, and the person who is the founder becomes, yes, the first amongst equals, still is the leader, but typically they're moving away from a founder-owner role to a CEO manager role. They can still own 100% or whatever percentage of the business. The legal ownership doesn't change, but the mindset about what this is that we have here, is this a business, is it really just an outgrowth of me? Is it an expression of my identity? Or is it an entity in its own right? It's making that second shift to that point where the business really achieves its own identity is something that often I see in franchisees. They're not prepared to make that step because they don't like the thought of a lack of control that it brings with it.
The lack of the control and having to share the responsibilities and build that organization. And I remember part of your book too. You talk about the teams, and how you build those cross-functional teams to build that stronger organization. And sometimes that's hard to give up those responsibilities. Even myself as a leader, we were just talking about the holidays, and some of us take a break, and some of us work a little bit harder because you want to stay ahead. And then I found what I did is I started doing other team members' responsibilities. It was going to be fine, and they'll take control in the beginning of the year, but I can go ahead and I can do that. So and franchise owners tend to do that. They want that control. They want all of those responsibilities. But we have to build that organization and those cross-functional teams, as you had mentioned, to build that stronger organization to get us to that. Next level.
That's right on the button. And I would repeat that there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking your business back to the fun stage and staying there. I mean, it is fun, first of all. It can be it can be very profitable if you manage it right. But if you really, really want to scale your business, if you want to grow to the point where, you're not pushing it uphill all day, every day, where you can really take a vacation and genuinely, not worry about it and not have to fret or call in or dial in or make things happen. If you want to get to the point where this business will scale to whatever level you want it to scale to, then the key question you've got to ask yourself eventually, and it's usually at this whitewater point where I encourage fund owners to really be ruthless with themselves about this. The key question is, am I doing what only I can do? And often the answer to that is most definitely not. I'm doing just about everything I can do, but many things that I shouldn't be doing or don't have to do. And that's really the need or the ability to look yourself in the mirror and say, am I doing what only I can do? And answer that in the affirmative is the key to that second stage growth that we've been talking about.
That's a very good point. I'm going to have to write that one down. I would love everybody to read the book. And one of the things that I was guilty of, I had your book for months. I can't remember when I bought it, but I've just really started digging into it over the last few weeks and totally forgot that after I purchased the book that you have resources available to us because we are a book owner. I just logged on to that. I think it was after we scheduled this call, so it was last week or the week before. There are several resources that you have that are available just to the book owners. Can you talk
Correct.
a little bit about that?
Sure. What I did was, I'd like to claim that this was prescient of me, but it wasn't. Excuse me just one second while I cough. Years ago, I began to, I generated a lot of content, and particularly when I came to start putting the book together maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I realized from the start that I wasn't going to be able to put anything like everything in the book, or it would just fire hose people, and it would also be dull as dishwater. I obviously wanted to pull out the, the really key principles, but just about every, certainly absolutely every chapter, and almost every single section in every chapter is something that I've been working with each of those topics for years upon years upon years. So we talk about building your org chart, or how to have people work cross-functionally, as we were talking about there, or the topic of delegation. Those are all major areas of the whole predictable success methodology that I have just tons of stuff on that I've worked through over the years. So I started throwing those all into a members-only website many years ago. Never really activated it apart from clients who worked with me, but didn't put it up as a standalone thing for people to buy into. And of course, when it came to the point where I was launching the book, I realized this would be just a wonderful resource for people who have bought the book, and I decided it would be only fair to people who support me by buying the book that to let them have that. So anybody that buys a copy of the book, there's a link at the back in the resources section that takes them to a place where they just, all they have to do essentially is type in a couple of words from a specific page to prove you own it, and then choose a username and a password, and you get access to all of that stuff. And I'm adding stuff to it all the time.
I can imagine, and I know, like I said, I just tapped into it a little bit, and there's a lot of resources there. Now, I have said that I'm subscribed to your blog, so it's predictablesuccess.com/blog. And over the months that I've been reading your blog, and I try to go back as I've missed, because you blog on a regular basis, and I tend to miss some of them. I have to go back and read them. But one of the things that I have found very, very helpful on your blog is sometimes you have videos, you have worksheets, and I think, you and I connected back in early November when one of your blog posts had really struck a chord with us on strategic planning, and you had a teleclass there that, we could download, and the entire team, Computer Explorers corporate team, took time on their own to listen to the telecourse. I think it was a 40 minutes telecourse, so I was able to put it on my iPod and listen to it on my way to work and listen to it on my way home. So your resources on your blog are very valuable as well. And then there's so many ways to connect to you in the community online. You have a Twitter account.
Les McKeown.
Yeah, Les McKeown. You have a Facebook page that we can like the Facebook page?
Yes, I do. In fact, what I did to make this really easy is you can just type in predictablesuccess.com, which is my website. So you can type in predictablesuccess.com / whatever social media tool you want to use to connect with me, and you'll go there. So predictablesuccess.com / Twitter, or predictablesuccess.com / Facebook, or predictablesuccess.com / LinkedIn, or predictablesuccess.com / YouTube. Wherever you want to connect with me, it'll take you there, and that's the easiest way to do all of that.
You have just a wealth of resources that we can tap into. Now, you're currently doing workshops as well, and that I've not been able to connect to. Are you doing them outside of the Boston area?
Yes, I do. I run a workshop every quarter. I run them, and I do the same cycle every year because I'm 134 years of age now, and I like some degree of certainty, and I like to be able to plan things. But I do New York around about Christmas most years. I do Seattle. That's the next one coming up in March. Then I do Boston, which is near where I live, at Harvard Faculty Club, which is perhaps the most hoity-toity of all the locations that I do in June, and then I do San Francisco, another place that I love, in September. So I repeat that each quarter. Very small groups, typically 10 to 15 people, maximum 15. a small, intense day and a half, and essentially what I do in that workshop, it's really like, if you can imagine not having had your annual physical checkup for 4 or 5 years, and most businesses haven't had.
Mm-hmm.
I really give business owners the opportunity to come spend a day and a half and, using the predictable success model, run through what is a really intense self-diagnosis as to where they are, where are they on the growth cycle, which are the 7 stages are they at, and most importantly, which way are they trending? Are you trending up towards predictable success or away from it? And then I use the content of my second book, which comes out later this year, which is all about the key management styles that are necessary to get to and stay in predictable success. I use that to give people a takeaway of what they need to work on in order to get into predictable success, or if they're already there, to stay there for the foreseeable future. And it's a fun day and a half, as I say, a small group, tends to be very confidential.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to bond a lot on the workshops because we're obviously talking about things that are very important to people.
Right, right.
They're probably about the funnest thing that I do. I mean, I get to meet wonderful people, and I've had, every workshop has got people from every walk of life. I've a one-man founder-owner, one-person founder-owner businesses with 2, 3, 4 employees, right up to divisional SVPs from global Fortune 100 businesses. And the wonderful thing for me is that I've got this fantastic methodology that works equally well for both those people. And here are 2 folks who would never normally spend time together and would wonder how they could learn anything from each other after a day and a half, finding their perspective on where they are and how they're going to grow their business, wholly refreshed by having spent time with these other people. So they're great. I really enjoy them.
Well, I look forward to being able to participate in one coming up soon. I feel that I'm about ready to graduate from your blogs and your book and your and LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and attend the workshop. But, you say it's fun, but I bet it's very intense as well. I mean, that's a very personal workshop to attend.
Yeah, it is. It's intense in that there's a lot of content. It's not intense in being intense, because I don't believe that much in that. My number one goal, and I discovered this, I think, when I turned 103, is I want to have fun. I've only got 2 rules in business. One, I don't work with anybody who's a jerk. And it was nice to get to the point where I didn't have to do that. Right. And the second thing is I want to have some fun while I'm doing it. And because I got to the point maybe 10 or 15 years ago where I realized, and I had proved to myself over and over and over again, that I have a really, really valuable model that I know people will benefit from, then I get to do the greatest thing in the world, which is, I come into a room with a group of people and I sit down and I share this content, none of which, funny enough, you and I happened to correspond on Twitter earlier today. And one of the things that I'd want your listeners to know is I have never told anybody something they didn't already know. That's not what predictable success is about. You read this book and you're not going to say to yourself, holy cow, I never knew that. In fact, if you're in business, you're going to react the opposite. You're going to say, wow, I knew that, but I never saw that so clearly. I didn't have words to describe that. And that's what I enable people to do. And who can't have fun doing that? So we have a great time. And there is a lot to do. But, for example, it's a no workbook workshop. I banned workbooks about 10 years ago. You ever come back from a workshop with this big pre-printed workbook and you put it up on a shelf and then it dies and goes to binder heaven?
Right. That's true. I had many of them. They're sitting on the top shelf, and they're very tough.
So we have 4 sheets of paper. That's literally what I hand out. Are 4 sheets of paper. I hand out copies of them over and over and over again during the day and a half, because we fill them in and then refill them in and then work at them again and work at them some more, and that's it. So I'm all about people taking away 3, a maximum of 3. I'm even happier when it's just 2, but a maximum of 3 very important stretch goals that I can then help them be accountable to implement in the next 6 months that will fundamentally change the pace and quality of their business's growth. That's what the goal of the workshop is. It's not about stuffing people's head full of information, not about selling my book, it's not about selling some ongoing coaching program. It's about having people come in for a day and a half, be in an environment they'll never be in again, and come out of there thinking, if I just do this and this, and maybe this third thing, because 3 is an awful lot bigger than 2. If I do these 2 or 3 things in the next 6 months, I will have a radically different business, and that's what I try to help every single attendee achieve.
Well, like I said, I'm definitely looking forward to being able to attend one, because just listening to the 40-minute teleconference, and you provided 2, I think maybe 3 worksheets that we used in our strategic planning after listening to the teleconference independently. So I could see where you would follow the same principles in your workshop. I can't thank you enough. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I can't thank you enough for spending a few minutes with me, allowing the listeners to hear the passion and the enthusiasm that you have in wanting to make us successful. And I would definitely encourage everybody to read the book, reach out to you, connect with you, and you connect directly, with us on Twitter, and I know you have a lot of followers, and I know you have a lot of clients, and you take the time to spend time with little old Deb CE on Twitter and Computer Explorer's franchise president. I thank you very, very much, and maybe you'll see me. What is it? September's the next one. What is this? This is January.
January. Next one's in Seattle in March, and
Seattle,
Boston in June.
Okay, well.
Both beautiful places. Well, I've enjoyed this very much indeed, Deb. Thanks for asking me. Happy to do it anytime. Certainly, let's do it again before I'm 157.
You've got to quit telling your age, because I just said in the beginning of the call, which it wasn't recorded at the time, that we're probably very close to the same age. So now everybody knows I'm 134. Thank you very much, Les. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you again soon.